Which would you say is better, storing your files in the cloud or having your own network storage? Well, of course, there are pros and cons to both approaches. We like cloud services because they're easy to use and, provided you continue paying your subscription fees, your data is safe, in theory. But it's that in theory bit that gives us pause for thought. Is your data backed up? Are your photos and videos truly private? And we kind of like the additional features that these cloud services often provide. Things like automatic creation of photo albums based on AI tools like face detection. But what if you can have your own private network storage, which the whole family or office can use, but where you've got complete control over permissions and security, and where you can install as much storage as you like without having to move to ever higher cloud subscription tiers? And that's where a network attached storage or NAS appliance comes in. And there's a new player in the market, UGREEN. Now they asked me if I'd like to take a look at one of their new NAS models, and this is the NASync DXP4800 Plus. It's one of the 4-bay models in their new range, which also includes 2, 6 and 8-bay models. And there's even an all-flash option, which looks really interesting. The specs and features vary across the range as you'd probably expect, so we'll just pop up a comparison on the screen that you can pause if you want to have a look at that. And when I first looked at the specs, there were 3 things that caught my attention. First of all, the connectivity, because there's a 10 gigabit Ethernet port and a 2.5 gigabit port. And I really like that. A 2.5 gigabit port will give a single user full speed access, or go up to 10 gigabit to add more concurrency or more simultaneous users. And secondly, we've got a 5-core Intel Pentium processor inside, which is offering a bit more performance than you normally get with these types of devices. And that's great for speeding up those AI image tools. The third thing that caught my eye is the price, because the MSRP for this particular model is $700, and that's already competitive. But if you use the link in the description for this video, you can currently get up to 35% off the price. So this NASync DXP4800 Plus has 4 3.5-inch drive bays and 2 NVMe drive bays. And that means that you can have a maximum storage capacity of up to 96 terabytes, which should be enough. It also comes spec'd with 8 gigabytes of DDR5 memory, but you can expand that all the way up to 64 gigs. And that's great if you plan to run some virtual machines on the NAS. UGREEN are also promising some interesting software features. So there's an integrated AI smart assistant which can recognize and classify images without having an internet connection. You'll also be able to search pictures with text keywords, and there's smart photo albums that intelligently identify and classify faces, places, animals, and more. And naturally, there's an app to help you get the most from the device, which is going to be important because one of the key selling points of this NAS is that it can be an alternative to cloud storage, where you're in complete control of your data. So if privacy is important to you and you want to keep your images and files on a storage system that you control, but you don't want to give up on all of those sort of cool AI features, maybe this is a solution. And it seems that you don't necessarily have to compromise on security either. Apart from the obvious benefit of having your data on your own trusted local device, there's a security manager in the app which helps to protect your data, and you can even perform scheduled virus scans. So there seems like a good spec here, lots on offer, a good price, and perhaps even some bold claims. I've bought quite a few different UGREEN products over the years, mainly USB-C dongles, hubs and adapters and some cables, and I've always been pleased with the quality, but network attached storage is a new product area for the brand, and they are entering a fairly competitive market space. So I'm kind of curious to see what they've been able to achieve in their first NAS outing. Is it worth considering this unit over more established brands? Well, I'm going to give this a good test, and I'll show you the whole process from the unboxing to the drive installation and the setup. And of course, we'll try out some of those features and do some performance tests. So just a couple of things to note. I did the initial setup here in the studio, but the tests were run in my home office where I have a 10 gigabit network setup. And I'm using both Mac and PC for the desktop tests and iPhone for the mobile tests. And I think it's only fair to state that this is a pre-production unit running pre-production software. And I did come across a few minor bugs, mostly with the UI. But the system's already had one update which fixed most of those things. So UGREEN are clearly working to refine and improve the software prior to launch. Let's start with the unboxing experience, which was really good. And I've got to say, I like the packaging. The specs are printed on the side of the box, which I'll run through in a moment. And we've got some of the key features highlighted. And I'm pleased to see support for Docker and virtual machine hosting. After all, a NAS appliance is a server and can be used for more than just storing data. So developers will love having the ability to spin up Docker containers, and movie buffs will appreciate having a DLNA compliant network media server. Again, as I said, this is a pre-production unit, so Docker support was added in the latest update, and I have given that a quick test. I spun up an Nginx container, which may mean something to the devs out there. UGREEN told me though that virtual machine support is coming in the next update, which at time of recording is due in a week or two. So haven't had a chance to test that yet, but it should be ready by the time these units ship. These kind of additional functions, I think it's fair to say you just don't get those with cloud storage. So that's one of the really attractive features of NAS devices. So inside we've got a box labeled accessories and then the NAS unit itself, and first impressions are really good. I like the design and it feels reassuringly well made. And the drive bays are really easy to slide out and back in, and they've got a basic safety lock. I really like this magnetic dust filter that just snaps straight over the fan on the back of the NAS. Really easy to remove and clean up the dust. I noticed also this metal door that's secured with 2 screws, and I love taking things apart, so naturally I immediately grabbed a screwdriver. And under the door we've got the 2 NVMe slots with the fixing screws provided, and there are 2 SODIMM slots for RAM. At the moment there's a single 8GB module installed, but that's a really easy upgrade if you want a bit more memory. The NVMe slots can be used for storage or for fast caching. Now if you've got multiple users that need concurrent access to the NAS, caching is really going to help performance. I probably will install a couple of drives in here for a future episode and do a bit more in-depth performance testing with that. So this is a good time to remind you to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so that you can be notified when that content drops. Inside that accessories box, we have an actual printed manual. When was the last time you got one of those? Now, if you're new to installing hardware, that's going to be useful. It's a really nice touch. And there's also a warranty card for the 2-year warranty that UGREEN are offering with this product. We've got a 150 watt power brick and a mains cable, and there's also 2 Ethernet cables supplied, which are compatible with 10 gigabit Ethernet, of course. There is also a screwdriver and 16 screws in the box, but you'll only need those if you're planning to install 2.5-inch drives. These drive sleds can take either a 3.5-inch drive or a 2.5-inch drive. So you have the option of going with an all-flash storage solution if you used SATA SSDs, which would be fast and quiet. And I'll show you in a moment why you don't need the screws for conventional 3.5-inch drives. We've also got 2 keys for the safety locks on the drive bays. Now these aren't security keys, it's just a little protection against accidental drive removal because these aren't hot swappable drive bays. So let's get on and install some drives. And we've got 4 Seagate IronWolf drives, each with 4 terabytes of capacity. And I expect for a home user this will be probably the most popular and cost-effective configuration. These drives are less than $100 each, or if you do want a little more performance, the IronWolf Pro has a faster spin rate for around $30 to $40 more per drive. I'll pop some links in the description for those drives. They are specifically designed for NAS use, and that is important. Now, as you can see, installation is really easy because the drive sleds have got this neat slide out mechanism, and there are 4 pins that hold the drive in place. Super simple to install and no need for any fiddly screws. Now, of course, even though it's a 4 drive bay unit, you don't have to put 4 drives in it. You could start with 2 and add more capacity later. And I say 2 rather than just 1 because you really want some redundancy in case a drive fails. Let's just take you through the ports and the external features now, starting with the front. We've got a power switch with LED, and there are 5 activity LEDs. 1 is for network and 1 for each of the drive bays, but I don't see an LED for either of the NVMe slots. We also have an SD card slot, which is UHS Type 1. I'd prefer to see a Type 2 slot, but that's just a personal preference. Often, if you're offloading your SD cards directly to the NAS, speed may not be your top priority. Next, we've got a USB Type-C port, which supports USB 3.2 Generation 2 at 10 gigabits per second. And that's a nice feature for connecting fast external storage. Just plug in a drive and it gets recognized within the file manager in the system, so you can offload files or back up files, whichever you prefer. And finally, on the front, we also have a 5 gigabit USB Type A port. On the rear, we've got an HDMI port, which can output 4K. So if you want to use the NAS as a media center, you can plug it directly into your TV and then use the app on your phone to select movies to play. Also on the back, you get another USB 3.2 Generation 1 Type A port, and then there are two USB 2.0 Type A ports. You've got the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port and the 10 gigabit Ethernet port. And there's also a reset button and the power input. So we've got our drives installed. It's time to have a look at the operating system, which is called UGOS Pro, and we'll go through the initial setup. And I should say that the OS in this particular model is installed to a 128 gig internal SSD, so you're not giving up any of your storage drives for system files and the core apps. But additional apps that you install will get installed onto the storage volume. So let's plug in the NAS, and I'm actually connecting to a 1 gigabit LAN here for the initial setup, and I'll switch to that faster network at home for the performance testing later. But once you've powered up the device and connected it to the same network as your computer, you should be able to open a browser, type in find.ugnas.com to discover your device. It does depend though on how your network is configured as to whether this is going to work. So on our network here in the studio, that doesn't work, but it's not a problem because we'll just download the app. We can then search the network, and there's the NAS. And we start the setup process by creating a local administrator account. Almost immediately, we're prompted to redirect insecure web access to a secure connection, and we're going to want to do that. Just bear in mind that this NAS, like all other NAS units, will use a self-signed secure certificate, and your browser doesn't know to trust that certificate. So the first time you connect, you'll see this warning, and that's completely normal. The connection, however, is encrypted and it is secure. That's probably a topic for another video another day. But back to the NAS, we can now set up user accounts and groups. So it should be pretty easy to manage the permissions on the device. And you'll notice too that we can enable the personal folder for each user group. Next, we need to set up the storage volume itself, and I'm not going to do anything complicated here. We'll just put the 4 drives into a single storage pool, and then we'll create a single volume using one of the RAID modes. Now, I'm not going to go into what all of the different modes mean in this video. You'll notice that UGREEN are recommending a selection of RAID 5, and I'm going to go with that. So that means that I'll get the capacity of 3 out of the 4 drives, and the remaining drive is used for parity data. What this means is that any one of the 4 drives can fail, and you shouldn't lose any data. Now, before the comments section lights up, I will say that RAID 5 has the potential to be problematic with larger volumes due to something called unrecoverable read errors, or UREs, but again, that's for another video. If your drives, like mine, are 4 terabytes or less, RAID 5 should be a safe choice. But if you are going for larger drives, then you should consider RAID 6. And RAID 6 will mean that you get half of the total capacity of the 4 drives here, but any 2 of the drives can fail. Having data redundancy is essential for network storage like this, but it is wise to remember that redundancy is not the same thing as a backup. So you might want to snapshot critical data to an external drive or even another NAS. And UGREEN have provided various methods for syncing and for backup, so there's plenty of flexibility here. You could actually replicate the entire storage volume to another server using rsync, or you could plug an external drive in and do scheduled backups, and more options besides that. But let's go back to our specific setup. And our final capacity is 12 terabytes, or slightly less once formatted. And because we're spanning data across those 4 drives, we're also going to get a performance benefit. So the storage volume will be faster than a single drive for large file copies. Nice. Considering that this is a brand new product, I have to say that the OS is pretty well developed and it's generally easy to use. And I'm looking forward to seeing how UGREEN is going to develop this further with future models and updates. But now let's turn to the questions we posed at the outset and compare this NAS with a cloud-based service. Firstly, with a file copy. So I've taken this folder that's full of video clips of my office, and there are 57 files in total, adding up to 2.95 gigabytes. And I'm going to copy them all to my OneDrive cloud storage and see how long it takes. Here in the studio we have a dedicated fiber line, but most users don't have access to that kind of connectivity, so I'm going to do this test on my internet at home. And my internet at home is fiber, but it's fiber to the cabinet, which is a couple of miles away, and then copper lines to my house. So the upload speed maxes out at about 13 megabits per second. And just remember there are 8 bits in a byte, so that's not even 2 megabytes per second. So it's not surprising then that the file copy took 29 minutes and 6 seconds. Here in the studio, our upload speed is closer to 250 megabits per second, but you're not even able to use all of that bandwidth because, of course, the copy is limited by the speed that the cloud provider offers at the other end. So even on our super fast fiber line here at the studio, that same copy still took well over 5 minutes. But now, let's do the same copy over the local network in my home office. Bear in mind this is a full 10 gigabit per second network, so the transfer speed is only limited by the speed of the drives in the NAS. And the copy is done in 7.5 seconds. That's a massive difference. If you're backing up a large photo library or you've got multiple users accessing the storage, the NAS option is hands down the faster and more efficient way to work. But this doesn't mean that you won't be able to access your storage over the internet, because you can set the NAS up to be accessible via the internet, and there's support for dynamic DNS names if you don't have a static IP address. So if you're copying files to your NAS over the internet, it'll be the download speed of your connection that will govern the speed of the transfer, not the upload. And most connections at home have a much faster download, so that might actually be an option for you. And you might be surprised at the performance. So next, let's take a look at Photos. We're going to go into the App Center and download the Photos app. And once we've done that and it's installed, you'll notice that we now get a Photos folder inside the personal folders for our users. And I'm going to connect to the NAS through the iPhone app, which works in the same way as the Mac and PC desktop app. And once connected, you can see we've got this nice interface where we can view some health and usage statistics for the device. And in the apps library, we just tap on the More icon and then we can see the Photos app. So let's launch that. From here, it's really easy to add photos from my iPhone photo library onto the NAS. Just select the photos that you want to add and they quietly transfer in the background. It's pretty seamless and pretty fast as well, even over Wi-Fi. You can then use the photo browser inside the app or from your desktop to quickly preview images. I did wonder whether files would also be available through the desktop file manager, but when you open the Photos folder, it's empty. I also tried copying a photo over the network using Windows Explorer, but it doesn't appear. And I think this would be a nice addition for a future software release so that you can access the photos either through the app or through a standard network file share. This isn't a deal breaker though, because it is very easy to copy photos over using the app. Or if you've connected to your NAS through a web browser, you can just press the Add button and browse anywhere on your computer. Thumbnails are generated in the background and will appear within a few seconds. And you can also just drag and drop files from your Finder or Explorer window straight onto the web browser, which makes it really easy. I like this date scroller that comes up if you bring your mouse over to the right side of the window. That's a useful touch. You can copy video files over as well using exactly the same methods, and you can play the videos within the app. So it's a great library for all of your memories, whether photo or video, and the AI touches are nice too. If we go into the albums section, you can see that the AI tool has already been working in the background to identify faces. And we can start to add names to the faces so that future images will be automatically grouped by name. Now, none of these systems can perfectly do this job because we change as we age, and some photos have less resolution than others. It seems that UGREEN has thought of that though, because you can merge recognized faces together. And this works great for these pictures of Ben. We can combine his super cute 2-year-old face with a more recent image. He's a good looking lad. Got that from his mum. Now you may not know, but Ben edits all of the Constant Geekery videos here and he does a great job, so quick shout out to Ben. And now back to the albums, and you'll see that we also have a Places album. So if your photos have GPS data in them, you can view them on a world map. The map's default position is here over China, and it does seem to have this habit of reverting to that default position in between looking at images. But again, this is pre-production software, and I'm sure little bugs like this will get fixed. And there are some other AI tools to explore, which you can download from within the settings. Some of these are not available yet in the pre-release software, so I haven't done any testing on them. But here's what you get. There's a blurry photo recognition tool, which would be kind of useful if you want to find and delete all of those out of focus shots from your evenings out with friends. And the similar or duplicate photo recognition can again help you save space if you've taken multiple shots of the same image. Then we've got a tool to recognize potentially sensitive content, which will cause photos to be blurred when browsing the library. Now, many people have photos that might fall into this category, and this perhaps highlights a top concern with cloud storage, because there have been some notorious leaks of compromising private images from cloud storage when certain celebrities were targeted by hackers. So UGREEN are at pains to state that all AI processing happens locally on the device itself, and none of your images get uploaded to anywhere on the internet. Nobody wants their private images out there where they can be potentially viewed by unknown individuals, even if it's perfectly innocent pictures of your kids at the beach or at bath time. You want private pictures to stay private. Pet lovers are going to be pleased to see that pet recognition is an installable feature, and it says it's going to be able to recognize 32 different cat and dog breeds, and that's really cool. And there's also that text recognition, which will allow you to search for text within images. Of course, many of these features exist in your smartphone photo library or as part of a cloud storage provider's service. So why should you have to give up all of those sorts of conveniences if you choose to stay in control of your data? So I really like that UGREEN is focusing on delivering this sort of experience, because it really enhances the overall appeal of a product like the NASync. So what do you think? Which is better, having your files in the cloud or having your own network storage? Personally, I'm tired of all of the subscription models and the trend towards not owning anything, even your own data. And there's a big part of me that wants to stand up and just say enough. But part of the problem is that running your own solution at home has always required a bit of technical know-how, and that raises a barrier to entry for most people. But NAS appliances have become much more user-friendly, and this NAS from UGREEN is no exception. I think most folks would be able to load this up with drives, get a simple storage volume set up, and start using it. For more advanced users, then the more advanced features will be there if you need them. I think, though, it's a really promising start, and it's only going to get better with future software updates. So I like this product, and I like the ethos behind it. And based on what I've seen in my testing and the quality of the hardware, I think it's safe to say that UGREEN have made a pretty solid entry into the NAS market. And I really hope they focus their development on making this thing so easy to set up and use that everybody has got the option to take control of their own data. So big thanks to UGREEN for sending this over and for sponsoring this episode. I think it's a really interesting subject. If you're interested though in the NASync range, please check out the links in the description, because at time of recording it's available to pre-order through Kickstarter at that reduced price. But I'm keen to know what you think about using NAS versus storing your files in the cloud. Please leave a comment with your thoughts, and if you've got any questions, leave those as well. I'll try and answer them. Thanks as always for your kind support, and I'll see you again soon for some more geekery.